These verses from chapter 5 focus on wealth from both a negative and a positive perspective. Beginning with verse 10. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there is nothing left for them to inherit. Everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. This too is a grievous evil. As everyone comes, so they depart. And what do they gain since they toil for the wind? All their days they eat in darkness, with great frustration, affliction, and anger. This is what I observe to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them, for this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Delighted that y'all are here this morning. And how many of you say it feels more weird than good? More good than weird, weird than good, good over weird, good over weird. We'll see where it goes and what develops, and I'm particularly excited for what God will do, in difficult times as well as all the good times. God is at work behind the scenes, often sometimes noticed, and God is shaping and molding something. Question is, do we see that and we move in God's direction, or do we battle for always what has been in the past? And that will certainly be before us in spades with the adjustments we're making. So we've been focused in a sermon series called Before You Leave the Nest, and using this image as not just the image of parents feeding their youngins and extended family, but trying to paint the picture that we as a church family have a part in raising families. And you never know how God will use what God hopes to bring through you to bless the families next door, or maybe even families that don't particularly know you. I can think of many times in my younger days where there was something that happened that was a blessing or significant to me, and I don't remember who it was. I remember the person, I could picture them, but they weren't, quote unquote, in my life, but I encountered them at church, and it made an impression. It's part of that stuff that goes in to feed the youngins. This is graduation time in lots of ways, and graduations are, of course, adjusting in dozens of ways as well. But all of those who are leaving the nest, whether they're headed off to a college or work or something else, this is a picture I've been using about what they're faced with. And it reminds me of Carl Jung's statement, a quote, hopefully you've heard, that the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't have an answer, the world will tell you who you are. It's a wonderful phrase about this incredible momentum that culture has, and those who are leaving the nest are like that surfer and that wave, and if they don't have a grounding in what we hope that they would have, then that wave will just take them wherever it wants to go. And so it's our hope that our youngins will particularly have certain things planted, maybe even some of those blossomed, but at least seeds planted for in the right time that things would develop and be a blessing. We started off several weeks ago focused on who we are. We want our youngins to know who they are, and it's the same as who you are, that our self-worth, our value, at the very core of our being, we are beloved children of God. And it doesn't have to do with how good we are or how bad we are, that God claims us as the beloved because of who God is. And that forms the very foundation for everything. And that doesn't just end, of course, as folks leave the nest. It continues. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about honoring your parents on Mother's Day and how that's not really focused on a word from for young children to their parents or parents to young children that they better behave. That's just assumed. That commandment is focused on adults taking care of their elders. And there is this molding and shaping aspect of that. It's not just about seeing that my parents get care, but I would say the community sees me caring for my parents, as do my children. And there's this shaping and molding that happens, and ripple effects go out in delightful sorts of ways. Honoring parents is an important aspect well beyond just the relationship with child and parent. Last Sunday we focused on alcohol and drugs, primarily alcohol. And when I think of that wave and what's going to hit youngsters when they leave the nest, alcohol and drugs, illegal, of course, and legal drugs, to me is just a very powerful thing that's happening and going to come upon them in terms of opportunity. And if there's something that happens in the nest that's protective and keeps those waves at bay, once you leave the nest, it's not there in the same way. It doesn't mean there's not resources, doesn't mean there's not help, but primarily our scriptural word on alcohol is about responsibility. Abstinence is a fine and good thing for folks to choose, and many of us need to and want to choose that, and that is a good and wonderful thing. But the primary focus is on responsibility that we're called to. So today's focus is on your money. And is it your money? Do you have money, or does money have you? I said a Sunday or two ago that when I was in seminary for all 4 years, I was an undergraduate hall director. And right across from the God Quad at SMU is the freshman quad, or was. And where about 1,000 youngins who had just left the nest would descend every fall. And we would have many problems, many of those focused on alcohol and drugs, but probably the next one in line, if not maybe even the first, was the consequences of youngins being away from home and not knowing how to handle money. And it was a thing with wide variety, and two particular things stand out in my mind, two examples that exemplify, I would say, that wave and the question, do you have money or does money have you? One was from a young man who came to me in the second semester, had gotten to know him. He had hardly any money at all. He was on a full scholarship, tuition, books, all of that. He was one of those ones that had to work in order to have spending money, and his family struggled to send him money so that he could go out to eat on the Sunday night meal when a cafeteria on campus didn't serve that Sunday meal. He came to me in the early of the second semester and said that he had to leave because financially he just couldn't do it anymore. Even with the full scholarship, it just wasn't working for his family. And he said it in about this sort of tone. It wasn't a particularly big deal. He was disappointed, but in his disappointment was this knowledge that he would find a way to achieve what it was he wanted to achieve. He would do that back home, happened to be in San Antonio. Contrast another picture. I'm in the cafeteria where all these thousands of freshmen are. I've started to eat with a few people, There's a table that seats 6 that's close by. It has all females with 1 seat yet to be filled. And a young woman comes and sits down her tray with a thud and a little bit of an attitude. And you can tell on her face that she's at that point of tears or screaming, "Oh my goodness," in some way. She's very agitated. Her friends quickly see that and they say, "Oh my, what's wrong?" And she says, "My dad has just cut me off." And they say, "Well, sit down and let's talk about it." And I and other tables nearby could overhear everything that was going on. What had happened is that her father, who covers all of her expenses, tuition, room, and board, had cut her back from spending money. And she only had now, after the cut, $1,500 a month to spend. This is 35 years ago. And Daddy had cut her back to $1,500 a month. 2 pictures. Does your money have you, or do you have money? I wonder how you would answer that question. The writer of Ecclesiastes reminds us that whoever loves money never has money enough. It reminds me of, there it is, this underlying principle of how we move in this world. And more is so much connected to what our culture wants us to hear and focus on, that we need more, whatever it is, money or the things money can buy, and it includes relationships and power and all those sorts of things. But our faith calls us to enough. And I'm thinking particularly of Jesus' teaching in the Beatitudes, where there is this bold statement that no matter what your circumstances are, this kingdom life and the fullness of it is available to you. That this kingdom life is not so much about changing my circumstances, but, as we're talking today, about having that sense of enough no matter what my circumstances are. Whoever loves money never has money enough. So there's this contrast between more and enough. More asks the question, how much can I keep? If we're focused on money, how much money can I keep? But as people of faith, we would ask, how much can I give away? Do you sense how opposite that is of how the world calls us and of how Christ calls us? The more says, how much do I have to offer, give, participate, etc., so that God isn't mad at me? We might not frame it in that exact sort of way, but what do I have to do to get my check mark? What do I have to do so that then I can do what I want to do? Versus, how can I be more Christ-like in my giving, if we're talking about dollars or service or anything? More says, how far can I push the rules, whatever the rules are in my family, in my church, about how we operate? How far can I push those rules versus how far can I push myself to be Christ-like? Just an incredibly different question. I'm reminded again, Carl Jung's, the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't have an answer, doesn't mean can you just spout something off, but if you don't have a grounding enough to do what needs to be done, what you're called to do when that wave washes over you again and again, then there is a lostness that comes. Whoever loves money never has money enough. How many of y'all have learned something about yourself with all the isolation and adjustments? One of the things that continues to be before me, and it's particularly focused on this Sunday and a focus on money, is how easy it is to take a sense of enough that I think I have, and for that to move a little bit more back into that more sense. I asked the Amazon guy not the Amazon guy, the guy who was delivering the Amazon to our door. Margot had ordered her 10,000th package. And I said, what's it like in the midst of all this for you? And he said, it's like Christmas without all the extra help. That he was just slammed, and all of the other delivery guys were slammed. I'm reminded of one of the things that I ordered were these. Anybody know what these are? They are magnets, but they are particularly magnets that are used to install sheetrock so that you can cut out for electrical outlets and things. And so I'm part of Home in a Week. We build a home every year in January. This church has been part of that last year and in the past. And throughout the year, from January to January, I spend time restocking things that we need. And there's a part of me that loves doing that. But what I've discovered in this virus time is not just needing to restock, but there was this thing in me that really wanted to just buy something. I couldn't go to the store, and I can get these cheaper online, so I did it online, and then I waited for that box, and I wondered, when is it going to arrive? And because this wasn't a priority like hand sanitizer and other things, this didn't come, and I found myself walking by the door wondering if the package was there. There's something that even when I'm focused on something that I could easily make the case, and it's true, this is a missional sort of outreach to those. It's part of God's blessing, and yet even in the midst of doing that difference between more and enough continues to haunt me. I'm probably the only one that is haunted like that. Whoever loves money never has money enough. And so that wave versus this. This is a picture of enough. As I grow in Christ likeness, as I am filled more by God's design and desire for me, the chains of life come off. And God is constantly trying to move in our lives to help this happen. And yet, this, next slide please, this is always before us. A sense of more or a sense of enough. Whoever loves money never has money enough, and whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. It seems like it ought to say, whoever has money never has money enough, and whoever has or loves wealth is never satisfied with income. But it says whoever loves money and whoever loves wealth, the amount of money or stuff you have is somewhat irrelevant to our attachment to it. I always thought that those who had plenty of money would be the first ones to be free from seeking and wanting more money. But throughout my ministry, I have met people of incredible wealth as well as people of incredible poverty who were absolutely consumed with wanting and striving after more. And in that same time, I've met people of great wealth and great poverty who are absolutely unconsumed with having more and find a sense of peace, generally through their faith with the things of God. No matter their circumstances, whoever loves money never has money enough. So the tithe is a 10% standard in our scriptures about how God designed us to be. And I will always encourage you to that. And particularly for those leaving the nest, I would want to encourage them to begin tithing. Tithing is that thing that I would say helps us move from focusing on more to focusing on enough. It is a practice that helps bring blessings to our lives. I have never met somebody that tithed or was moving towards the tithe that struggled with wanting more. That's probably too bold to say. Let me rephrase. I've never met somebody that was not blessed by that movement. There are struggles, of course. My brother told me recently of something I didn't know about he and his wife, that when they married, they both were tithing and continued to tithe all throughout their life. They're still alive. And he spoke of how tithing helped them go from struggling and worrying to a sense of enough. My thought is that tithing is enough that it forces us to pay attention, and yet there's enough left over that it reminds us that we truly do have enough in terms of dollars, sorts of thing. This is a picture of Adam LaRoche. Anybody a baseball fan recognize Adam LaRoche? He, in 2014, I think, went to the White Sox with a big whopping contract of $25 million. And it made the news and headlines. And in 2016, he walked away from it, and he walked away from $13 million because there was something he wanted to do with his family that involved his son coming regularly, as he had in the past, to the clubhouse that was suddenly denied. And so he said, I'm done. I think he's 40 now. Millions and millions of dollars, and walking away from $13 million. All he had to do was complete that year and he'd have that $13 million, but he said, that's not worth it. Does money have you, or do you have money? It's a wonderful example, I think, of somebody who has a great deal that is not consumed by those dollars. This is a picture, next slide please, of mom and dad, my parents. When I was in first grade, they made a decision that the work that my dad was doing needed to change. My dad was a petroleum engineer. He worked in the oil fields, and he would be gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And my brother tells me, his older brother, says that in our household at that time, I was in first grade, he was in third, the mantra was, when's Dad going to be home? And so they made a decision to change jobs, and he went from being a petroleum engineer to being a safety engineer for an insurance company here in Corpus, and he took a very significant cut in pay. And it was the difference. I'd say an example, I really only came to know it as I grew up in terms of what happened. They didn't share this with myself and my brother except over time. Do you have money, or does money have you? This is a wonderful example for me as a person, and I felt blessed by it. Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. Y'all recognize John Wesley? This is John Wesley. This is his actual height. He is participating with all of us with wearing his mask. We thank you very much, John. His advice that gets lots of press regarding dollars is to earn all you can, to save all that you can, and then to give all that you can. One of the ways that translated for Margot and I and what we taught our youngins while they were in the nest, and they have held to that in wonderful ways since they have left, is to think in terms of 3 buckets. And I would love for all of the youngins leaving the nest to think in terms of 3 buckets. Our parents who are starting off with a youngster to think of 3 buckets. The first bucket is the God bucket. And that's where that first 10% goes. Whenever I receive something, it first goes in there, 10%. The second one is the savings bucket. And that's what the second 10% goes to. And then this one says L and G is how we adjust our living by our giving. Our world says you start here and you move in that direction. And if there's anything left over after you've adjusted and gotten everything you need and want, then you might put something in savings and you might put something in the God bucket. But God's design for us moves in this direction. Here is an audible way of thinking about that. This is one dime of the dollar that I'm holding. And what I like about that sound is it adds yet another sensory way of grappling with, am I really going to have enough if I follow God's plan? Am I going to be taken care of? Will I be able to eat? Etc., etc. Adjusting our living by our giving. It's a vital and an important thing. One of the things that I would hope most for the youngsters leaving the nest is that they would start off by tithing. And when they receive something for birthday or for graduation or Christmas, or if they're working or they have an allowance, that they first and foremost take that first 10% and put it in there. Put a second 10% in the savings, and then adjust to living with that 80%. I want to encourage everybody that's leaving the nest, if you don't have a Grace coffee cup, we have plenty of these, and I want to put one of these in everyone's hands so that this might sit on the shelf of wherever it is you're headed to as a reminder of your faith community and as a reminder of putting that first dime in there. Malachi 3:10 says, test me. It's the only place in Scripture where God says, test me. Bring in that full tithe and see if I don't take care of you. That's what I would hope, particularly for our young'uns before they leave the nest. Whoever loves money never has money enough, and whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with income. Will you pray with me? Gracious God, we give you thanks this day for those that are with us for a period of time in the nest, in our homes, in our sanctuary, in the halls of churches. And we seek to be a blessing throughout their life, not just the time that we interact on a daily basis. Bless us as your gathered community, that we will love and surround them and encourage and plant seeds that will blossom in their lives around money, around all the things that the world has a different vision about. We thank you for the blessings of being your vessels and of receiving the power of your Holy Spirit to move through us, bringing blessings to us and blessings to others. We ask all this in the name of your Son, our Savior, Jesus, and all God's people said.